This is an example of zero head to piston clearance.
I don't like surprises, but when I'm surprised, I'm not surprised. After 32 years, this 855 looks good, but good can be only sheet metal deep. Part 4 of I Overbought continues with removing of the engine and taking a look inside. Bottoms up.
I know these bolts around the flywheel and the flywheel mounts are going to be tough, so I'll just get as many as I can loose while they're still in the chassis. While they're still in the frame. Oh, they're not so tight. No, not tight at all. I may not be able to get this plate out, but once I lift the motor, I'll move it ahead, get it out, and then I can work on the flywheel bolts. Not exactly tight. See, it was a lock nut with a washer. And while it's still in there, I'll use the flywheel to break that nut loose. You take a puller, and I was able to use the front mount bolts. They were the correct thread and the correct size. So we'll put a little pressure on this. We'll use our bar to keep the engine from turning. We'll put a little more stress on this. Pop it with our little hammer. So I've been working on this a little bit more, and I think she's coming off. There we go. Let's see if I can catch it before it does. Well, I made a little change in plan. I set the motor back in the frame so I can use my bar to hold the flywheel and then my long wrench to break those flywheel bolts loose. I found this wrench at Northern Tool, and I love it. This thing is handy in a pocket in a shirt. This is a lot easier than trying to do this when it's on the engine stand. Let's just set it down there. Be safe about it. Try to get it off of that pin. Yep, it's heavy, but it's off.
Since the radiator was low on coolant and the dipstick showed over full, water may show up in the oil. Nope, I don't see any, nor did I hear any metal hitting the pan either. Sorry for the fuzzy focus.
Finally bought one of these. It's got some nice little knurled places in here. Catch your filter. Ooh, I hear pieces rattling around in there. Well, I've left the engine at this 45-degree angle, that hoping these parts will have collected in the intermediate, but at the intermediate pan, so we can see what some of those are. The rest of them will fall into this box underneath. These are 12 millimeter. I don't think there's any reason to show you taking all of them loose, except that one right there was not tight. That one was tight. I'll just go ahead and leave the recording going as we crack them loose and see that they all are.
I must admit, the 855 looks good and gives the impression it was well cared for.
They're plenty tight.
Paint looks original, like it stayed inside, and it has the usual dents and scratches.
Had one fairly tight and one not.
What about the surprises? This brings up the discussion of buying a used 55 or any tractor.
Maybe need to get the longer wrench.
The first thing I'd look for is missing and non-correct fasteners. This indicates that someone has removed them or not replaced them when they've fallen out. Next are the decals. Have they been painted over? And lastly, does the engine idle smoothly when started? That's a big one. Loping indicates uneven ignition pulses, and unfortunately, that never gets better on its own.
All right, I'll start building a little suspense here. Do I want to try it off of here and let stuff fall out? Yes, let's. Maybe it's coming loose. Stuck pretty tight. There came a few parts. A few little parts down in here. Alright, the first thing let's look at the parts that we can find that are useful. Small piece there. Not sure. Part of connecting rod. Rod cap. It's laying here. Bolt is sheared off, as is the second one. These are originals. Rod bearings actually look okay. Just thought I'd mention there are 4 17mm bolts that go into this intermediate case, and they come out just far enough to clear the engine stand. You can still leave them in without taking it back off, because they're just little short bolts. Well, I spoke too soon. I take these bolts out. I find 2 different lengths, if you can see those. My diesel guy says that a lot of times these engines are overhauled by people that have been used to doing gasoline engines, and he says they find a lot of loose bolts. Something common with the guys that do gas when they come to a diesel. Also, if you notice that there's some of the red silicone, which would indicate to me that this engine has been apart twice. This would be the 3rd time. Well, now we can get a little better look at what happened down in here. This is pretty self-explanatory. So as the crank was turning in this direction, the rod would have come loose, and the crank just took it and hammered it right through the block. So with everyone's permission, I'm going to rotate the engine over. I've got a bad spot right there where it hit. We'll just come around again. Watch this spot here. Pretty bad shape. Sure got it out of the way. Okay, as I turn it slowly, you can see where it was chewed up there. Now that it's out of the way, we can look down at the connecting rod. You can look at that side of the rod that has been interfering with the crank. I would usually use a piece of wood, but not necessary at this time. Okay, these are the players. I'm going to try to show you what happened, and I may have to do some close-ups separately. But the first thing I want you to see is where this rod bolt came from down in there. And if you push it together as far as you can, you get a lot of clearance right here, showing that that bolt was coming out. Then on the other side, I can actually put the bolt in and start threading it until it goes down and engages the remainder of the bolt. And it has about that much sticking out, that much clearance. Another detail worth mentioning is the end of the rings. Where the rings meet, that gap, these were all really close together. They're supposed to be 120 degrees apart. It's right in the area where the corrosion is, whatever this stuff is, on the top of the piston. So it looks to me like this piston has been going up and down loose and bouncing off the head. The compression would be all over the place, and that's why maybe some of the fuel was washing down the top of the piston.